the poison pilot has lost everything, drugged and misdiagnosed, and now trying to get some justice out of all this. Len.
Good evening, Andy, listeners.
Good evening.
I spoke to Andy during the week, and I am receiving a lot of emails and being copied into emails where people are being thrown into the long grass when they're complaining, being passed from here pillar to post, particularly with the police and professional bodies. And I believe Andy last night, night before, had a man called Alan Dransfield on his show, all about subject access requests and freedom of information requests. And Alan Dransfield was given an unpleasant title of being vexatious. But the question is, vexatious to who? Now, in the late 90s and very early 2000s, my health started to fail rapidly. I now know it's because of the toxic fumes you find on aircraft. And the governments, the airlines, the manufacturers have known of this since the mid-50s. So they knew the damage, and it was a case of covering it up, covering it up, covering it up. So I'd been poisoned. I wasn't well. I knew I had something neurologically wrong, but I just couldn't nail it. I had a brain injury, and the fumes from the aircraft had damaged part of my brain, the central cortex. It also happens to cabin crew, engineers, even passengers. And you only need to go on one flight, and it could happen to you. So what happened? My wife's lawyer, my wife divorced me, and her legal team, BP Collins Solicitors, Dominic Brazil, One King's Bench Walk, they got me certified under the Mental Health Act as mentally ill and placed under the government legal services, specifically the official solicitor of the High Court, where for over a year I was medicated, I was given a chemical cosh until I'd lost capacity. And that lasted over a year. And every attempt I made to try and escape the government legal system, presently headed by Susan McGibbon, more about her later, I just couldn't escape. And what happened, I went to the Civil Aviation Authority for pilots medical. I told them what had happened, and their chief medical officer now intervened, told the British Airline Pilots Association, BALPA, to get me to Professor Gordon Turnbull, who's the advisor in psychiatry to the Civil Aviation Authority, and others. And I got to Gordon Turnbull, and I was then on the road of escaping from the government legal services and the official solicitor. They weren't happy that I'd gone to Turnbull, but that was my only way of escape. Turnbull stopped all the psychiatric medication, olanzapine, sodium valproate, zopalone, and he said, Mr. Lawrence, I've got to go against all these psychiatrists, 5 psychiatrists. So bear with me, and we'll work through it. But what Turnbull and I didn't know, doctors who were giving themselves title of locum consultant psychiatrists weren't actually consultant psychiatrists. They were registrars under training with Buckinghamshire Mental Health Trust. Anyway, we worked through it, and Turnbull released me. And then I started the long road of trying to find out what had happened to me, who authorised the sale of my house, how I had ended up homeless and lost all my assets. And the very system which would be in place to protect you, it just wasn't there. And the more and more I probed, the more I came under attack. I had the misfortune to live in the Thames Valley Police area, and whilst there was some good cops, there was an awful lot of unpleasant individuals in that force, and it continues today, who have gone out of their way to obstruct me. But we've got there. Anyway, the first thing I did, I applied for a subject access request. Didn't get very far. It wouldn't be in the public interest to disclose these files. It was the normal response. So I went to a local court called Aylesbury, where I encountered a judge called District Judge Brooks. And the man was very sympathetic, and he gave me a lot of time. And he actually made an order which allowed me to go to the office of the official solicitor of the High Court in London and search my files. They didn't appeal it, and they laid all the files out, and I looked at them, checked them, and I was finding documents, call of protection this, call of protection that, incapable of legal discussion, and I asked that every document be copied and I be provided with a copy, and that actually happened. And I went back about 3 weeks later and collected those files. I read through them. Thames Valley weren't helpful, and eventually I was probing how legal aid had been formed, how I got legal aid. And I actually got a legal aid certificate to sue the legal aid board, issued by the legal aid board, and it went to court. And in court, in our, where was it, Aylesbury County Court, district judge said, can't you settle? And the solicitor for the legal aid board said, we've been told to fight this. And that was their intention. And after that, there was another hearing where a solicitor from the legal aid board, Dina Rala, and a guy called Jonathan Flores, we attended court, and they tried to get me sectioned. Told the judge I was seriously mentally ill. And the judge said, well, I have seen Mr. Lawrence in another case, and I've seen him over a number of hearings, and I don't see that he's mentally ill. And so they went away with their tail between their legs. Then they came back for another attack on me, and a different judge now. He then had a real go at them. He said, you said you don't have these files. Look, the evidence there, you do have them. Anyway, I finally, Matthew Coates, who was the director or chief executive of the legal aid board, he authorised a disclosure. And it gave me an incredible insight how cases are financed by the legal aid board. And what had happened, I'd had a brain injury. I'd been certified under Part 7 of the Mental Health Act, which means only a judge in the High Court Family Division, the Chancery Division, or the Master of the Court of Protection, or one of his nominated officers, can make any order regarding money and property for that patient. Now, the only way the official solicitor of the High Court, Government Legal Services, could finance a divorce, because my wife was divorcing me, was to have legal aid. But I was 330,000 over the legal aid limit. I had too much money, and so I wasn't eligible. And what they did, they didn't want to go to the Court of Protection because they didn't want to disclose about me. And they wrote to a friend, we'll call him Ron, and they asked Ron, the solicitor who did it, her name was Sarah Benfield. She worked for a firm in Reading called Ratcliffe, Juice and Gamma. It's no longer in existence. And Sarah Benfield wrote to my friend Ron and asked him to be, my litigant's friend, and asked him to sign legal aid forms and to get my signature on the legal aid forms. Not telling Ron that a Court of Protection certificate had been issued, and he couldn't act for me, and not telling Ron that it had to go to the Court of Protection. So Ron signed the forms. He got me to sign the forms. He sent them back to Sarah Benfield, who then sent them to the Legal Aid Board. Legal Aid Director was a lady called Ruth Waite. And after a few days, a legal aid certificate got issued in the name of myself under my friend Ron as the guardian. Once Sarah Benfield had got hold of that legal aid certificate issued to Ron, she immediately had it amended, saying that Ron wasn't a suitable person to be my guardian, and had it amended to the official solicitor. And that is how they circumnavigate the Court of Protection to get access. Now, the official solicitor had a legal aid form, and they had unlimited assets because the charge was put against the house I live in, so they knew they were going to get their money when the house was sold. So they then went on a revenue gathering exercise. But what I didn't know, that my wife's barrister had known a lady called Helen Mary Cliff, a solicitor within the Legal Aid Board. Sorry, a solicitor within the Official Solicitor's Office, Helen Mary Cliff is now the Deputy Official Solicitor. And my wife's barrister, Dominic Brazil, had worked with Helen Cliff before she joined the Government Legal Services. So Brazil got me certified, placed under Helen Cliff, and she then made all the clinical and financial decisions, what Barrister Dominic Brazil wanted. And no way could I escape. And they then put on board a man by the name of Nicholas Allen. He's now Nicholas Allen, KC, and a Deputy High Court Judge and Head of Chambers, 29 Bedford Road. And Nicholas Allen made no reference to the Court of Protection. He made no reference that I was a patient under Part 7 of the Mental Health Act, and no one could basically touch me. It had to go to the Court of Protection. And he allowed Dominic Brazil to absolutely asset strip me. And here we are 20 years later. I've now got Barrister Nicholas Allen's emails. And he writes to Dominic Brazil at 1 King's Bench Walk and says, "Dear Dominic, as requested, I simply accepted all that you required. I'm not sure of the consequences, but I hope it's okay for you." And Alan's subsequently written to me saying he can't support the evidence in court. Notably, the official solicitor agreed the sale of my home. The official solicitor did not agree the sale of my home, and the official solicitor is not authorised to make that decision. Helen Mary Cliff made that decision. So we got a nice little gang. And one has to question, Andy, on how many other people have they done this to, and how many people are they doing this to?
It's obviously got to be thousands, I think.
Well, yeah, so especially Thames Valley Police, the Economic Crime Major Fraud Unit, they wrote to me. They said it was an error that Solicitor Sarah Benfield obtained your signature on legal aid forms. The solicitor informed the Law Society that she did it knowingly, and she was ordered to pay me a compensation. The maximum she could pay me under their Law Society guidelines was £600, and she had thousands of pounds, her firm and the rest of them. So, but Thames Valley, that is my first introduction to the dishonesty within Thames Valley. There is a culture of bullying in that force, because there are some good cops who have contacted me off the record. They've been to see me. They've leaked me information which I'm not meant to see. Yes, so there are some good ones, but the problem's at the top, at the very top, with successive chief constables. In fact, around about 2017, under Chief Constable Francis Habgood, Deputy Chief Constable John Campbell, an inspection by Her Majesty's Inspector of Constabularies found that 35,000 crimes had not been recorded by Thames Valley. These crimes included rapes, sexual assaults, domestic violence, vulnerable adults, and vulnerable children's cases. Habgood retired as Chief Constable and went to become the part-time chair of Buckinghamshire Safeguarding Board, and John Campbell, the Deputy Chief Constable, gets elevated to Chief Constable, and again the non-recording of crimes continues, and it is John Campbell, the Deputy Chief Constable, who was in post together with when this assault on me, latest attack has occurred, and his Deputy Chief Constable, now Chief Constable, was Jason Hogg. So there we are, Andy. That's how it all started. Now, Bar Standards Board, let's go start with them. I went to the Bar Standards Board and complained about the barristers, and the head of the Bar Standards Board was Dr. Vanessa Davis. The head of investigations, I recall, was Sarah Downs. She's now been married, and she's got a different surname. And they whitewashed it, all got whitewashed. I was invited to a meeting about a few years later. Sitting around the table was Dr. Vanessa Davis, was Sarah Downs. There was Jane Renshaw, barrister from 4 Paper Buildings, the Chambers of Mr. Justice Cohen, and quite a few others. And anyway, after that meeting, I got a letter from Dr. Vanessa Davis, and what it said, the Bar Standards Board don't have the power to question barristers. So the barristers weren't acquitted, they just weren't questioned. Now, on that panel, which reviewed all the what had happened to me, was a lady called Sue Carr. She was a barrister at the time. Sue Carr is now the Lord Chief Justice of England and Wales. But she recused herself, and she didn't participate. About 6 others also did the same, but I got the names of everyone who participated in this. And they whitewashed it, and the barristers were never cleared. They weren't investigated. So that's the Bar Standard Board. I got a disclosure from the Bar Standards Board about 1.5 years ago, and it was very informative. I was told by the Bar Standards Board that my files had all been destroyed around about 2013. They hadn't. They still had them in an electronic format. And so I did a subject access request, And I got all these files. I think there was could have been as many as around about 8 boxes. But I got the lot, Andy, so it really opened up what goes on in that organisation. And they're not there to help you. They're there to protect the image of the bar. So a waste of time. The other professional body I dealt with was the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. Initially, we used to have a thing called the Legal Complaints Service. Well, I went through that and they got told to reinvestigate by the legal ombudsman, and they did, and they said it had to go to a higher level. So it went to the Solicitors Regulatory Authority. And surprise, they appointed an outside solicitor to investigate. And that outside solicitor was absolutely brilliant. She absolutely chastised these solicitors, what they'd done to me. Surprise, surprise, she's swiftly removed from the case. And it was brought in-house with Suki Gill and a woman called Lanani, who was their director of diversity. They whitewashed it and they shut it all down. The same with the Bar Standards Board. They'd appointed a retired judge, Mr. Rice. Mr. Rice came out and saw me. He said, "This is dreadful." And because Mr. Rice was helping me, the Bar Standards Board withdrew his services from me. So they are no angels. Vanessa Davis left the Bar Standards Board and surfaced now with the General Medical Council. So it's revolving doors. These people move around. So that was the Law Society, Solicitors Regulatory Authority. Then the General Medical Council. Now, Dr. Jeremy Royce had certified me without a medical under the Mental Health Act, issued a Call of Protection certificate without a medical, when an NHS doctor days earlier has said my cognition was grossly intact. What did Anthony Omo, still the director of the GMC, whitewashed it, and they did nothing. These are the files which you see on screen now, Andy. I recovered them from the law firm Simpson Miller around about 2016. They had been, and there's a Call of Protection certificate there. Simpson Miller had withheld these files from me. There was a hearing in 2012 and 13, and it was heard by the then designated family judge for Reading, His Honour Judge Simon Oliver. Again, he's very central to this attack on me and many others. And Oliver was conducting hearings, certainly this court of protection hearing with me, when he wasn't authorised. He wasn't a court of protection judge, but that didn't stop him. He carried on, and he denies making a judgment. In the last few months, I've now recovered that judgment. He did. Anyway, I appealed Oliver's judgment, and he wasn't present in court. It was a secret family court. You've heard a lot about them. No one's allowed in, just the barristers and the victim. There he is. And Oliver and I have I was trying to find the right word. Oliver's a Freemason. I was a Freemason. And he attacked me viciously in the justice system. And I and many of my colleagues have all resigned from Freemasonry for the failure of Grand Lodge to deal with it. David Staples, the Grand Secretary, was fully aware of what Oliver was doing, and so is the present Grand Secretary, but he's been allowed to get away with it. And Thames Valley Police and other forces have shown a willing blindness not to do anything. Fortunately, there's some people within the police service who've got a much different view. Anyway, there we are. He's at the centre of this attack for years against me, but he never expected to get caught. But he has been. A lot of his cases involve females and young children. A number of these mothers have fled the UK. They've gone abroad outside of UK jurisdiction so that their children cannot be taken and put into care. Unfortunately, some of those mothers did not escape and they've lost their children. Elderly people have been put into care by Oliver, unable to escape. They've actually died, like my friend Jean Sands, his partner, David's mum, all died in care. There's another girl being held. What was her name? Oh, anyway, she's got I think muscular dystrophy she has, and Oliver was keeping her in this care home, and the mother couldn't get her out. But what he did, Oliver, my appeal had been successful, and Mrs. Justice Porfley, I'm told this by the listing clerk at Reading, had instructed Oliver to send my case to the Court of Appeal. Oliver had no intention of doing that, and what he did, he printed off 2 emails, and on one of them, in Reading, he wrote to Bancroft Rimmer, appeal refused. But it's now been confirmed by the Court of Appeal that Bancroft Rimmer has never been a Court of Protection judge, never been authorised to do these cases. So we're still to establish exactly how many cases Oliver and Bancroft Rimmer have done and how many cases instructions have been given to make sure the appeal fails. That's why, again, another reason why my house was raided and the attempt made to section me. And even as Somerset Police, under Chief Constable Sarah Crew, they weren't nice to me. But I've been told by Avon and Somerset, the instructions came from, once again, Thames Valley Police. And Hampshire Police also had a significant involvement. They wouldn't give me a subject access request. The files they won't give me, I've now recovered from another source. There's just Lord Hardy, I think you will remember this because you're quite active around about 2012 with Kevin Ball, when Lord Hardy, who was the former Advocate General of Scotland, he chaired the mental capacity meeting, and he published his results, and he said tens of thousands of people are being detained under the Mental Health Act. The safeguarding rules are not being followed, and in some cases they are being willfully disobeyed. And I'm one of those victims. One of the problems people face is when they start to whistleblow or they talk about it, they get hit with civil restraint orders, or in the case of, or extended civil restraint orders, with threats of imprisonment and the seizure of all your assets. In one of these cases where the Daily Telegraph and the journalist Christopher Brooker was dealing with an Oliver case, Brooker wrote an article and said he'd got silenced by the most vicious gagging order he and the Telegraph had seen. We now know the name of that judge who made that, and the Met Police also know him because they'd encountered him. You can't go to the police, Thames Valley, Avon and Somerset, even Devon and Cornwall. Waste of time, Andy. City of London. These crimes are not being investigated. They're not being recorded. But more so now, it was a tremendous insight into this attack on me. Make no doubt it came from Simon Oliver and the government legal under Susan McGibbon, Treasury Solicitor. That's where this origins of this attack came. Their files have also been recovered. They're not in my home. I've seen them. And it was never, ever the intention when they raided my house on Avon and Somerset on the 30th of March, 2022, to arrest me and take me in for questioning. The intention was to get me sectioned and detained under the Mental Health Act and silenced. And that was their primary objective. And because I was in Freemasonry for a long time, the Masonic Lodge I belonged to had quite a few police officers, policemen in there, particularly those from the Detective Training School at Hendon and from the Metropolitan Police Obscene Publication Squad, the paedophile unit. My employment, because I used to fly royalty and senior government people and others, brought me into a lot of contact with royalty and special protection officers and special branch officers. And so I've been fortunate to have access to these people who've spent a lot of time helping me. So what happened? We know about 8 weeks before I got arrested on the 30th of March, Avon and Somerset, some officers who were in there were ferreting, and a PC was raising questions regarding the call of protection. That's the brain injury card I hold. It is endorsed by the National Police Chief Council. I've been accused of falsifying that by mental health nurses. One of many, many allegations, all designed to discredit me and put me for a psychiatrist, and the psychiatrist would detain me for observation. It's all done deliberately. That one's been addressed. Anyway, this PC was sniffing about the call of protection. Yeah, that is the Premier League player, Ben McAvoy, and who was the other one? Bruce Matthews and Carly Reynolds. They were the ones who were allowed to subject me to 2 hours of psychological assaults in a police custody centre, knowing that I had a brain injury card. And during that period, when I was being held in the custody cell, the appropriate adult was removed from me, leaving me totally undefended with no legal representation to be bullied by these. Oh, it was hilarious. They enjoyed every minute, smirking, grinning, particularly McAvoy. I remember that, smirking outside my custody door. I am interested to know whether he is a Freemason, because Freemasonry had a very significant input when I was in Avon and Somerset Police under attack. Anyway, carry on. 8 weeks before I was arrested, this PC in Avon and Somerset was sniffing around the call of protection and what had gone on. He was quickly removed from that investigation and replaced by a detective sergeant. In the same time, in professional standards, detective superintendent, detective inspector had referred Chief Superintendent Claire Arms, Head of Operational Support, Avon and Somerset Police to the not so independent Office of Police Conduct with a finding of obstruction of justice in my case involving Judge Simon Oliver. And the IOPC, they don't investigate senior officers. They sent it back for a local resolution. And what happened with that local resolution? Detective superintendent, detective inspector got taken away from the case in professional standards, and a detective inspector, Nicky Brickwood, was appointed. Brickwood features in a documentary with Claire Arms on Channel 4, To Catch a Copper, and they're involved with a case where a man called Rion has spent almost 3 hours on a police custody cell without medical attention, and he had a brain hemorrhage. They hadn't told them of that. They just said when he became unwell, they called an ambulance and took him to hospital. That weren't the case. He had spent almost 3 hours with a brain hemorrhage, unconscious on the floor. So these are the people we're dealing with. Anyway, going back to the IOPC, they sent it back to the Avon of Somerset. The detective superintendent and inspector gets replaced. And then we had Mickey Brickwood step forward. Then we had a succession of what they called police complaints, civilian investigation officers. We had the first one called Abigail Bridger. What did she do? She decided she'd investigate Assistant Chief Constable, now Deputy Chief Constable, John Riley, rather than investigate Claire Arms. Then we had the next one called, I forget her name. We had a female. Then after that, we had a guy called Kroll. He reckoned Miss Avery, that was it. She then refused to engage with me. Then we had a Mr. Kroll. Then after that, we had the manager of the professional standards department. He came very close to calling me a vexatious complainant. But it's very interesting, Andy. Not one of these individuals, including Nicky Brickwood, told me that Chief Superintendent Claire Arms had a finding made against her for the obstruction of justice in my case. They covered it up. That's Claire Arms. And importantly, Claire Arms had a previous finding against her in Devon and Cornwall Police following a hearing with Simon Oliver, when Oliver had sent instructions to the Court of Appeal to ensure that my appeal failed. Thames Valley emailed Devon and Cornwall, told them to come out and see me. It was alleged by a woman called WPC, now Sergeant Emma Pag, or Emma Story Barrett was her last name, that she'd been out, spoken to me at length and sent a report back to Thames Valley. She had not been there because I was being safeguarded and at my home. And eventually the police admit that it was a false entry, and the woman who covered it all up, surprise, surprise, Claire Arms. And just to make things worse, Claire Arms sent me a file, not my file. She sent a file on a Mr. Joseph Miles, nothing to do with my case. All the details of the complete file, all about Mr. Miles, his complaint, an Eastern European gang, fraud, names the Devon and Cornwall officers. She sent that file to me. Apparently my file got sent to Mr. Miles. I've never had that file back. Yeah, so she, that was Claire Arms. Anyway, she had surfaced in Avon and Somerset and now she was in a key position. She was chief superintendent in charge of operational support with responsibility for criminal investigations and police custody. What a position to be in to attack me. So the officers would report to her eventually. She had reported to, Arms reported to a guy called Assistant Chief Constable Will White. I haven't got any evidence of any misconduct from him. But what is interesting, the Deputy Chief Constable is a woman called Nikki Watson. Her married name is Nikki Marsh, and she's married to a former Chief Constable of Avon and Somerset, presently the head of the National Police presently the head of the College of Policing, Chief Constable Andy Marsh. Now, it was only Nikki Watson in her capacity as Deputy Chief Constable who could have stopped that investigation in professional standards, or possibly the Chief Constable, Sarah Crewe. It was one of those two. Nikki Watson left Avon and Somerset Police whilst under investigation, but as I've said, like all senior officers, the IOPC tend to clear them. So it was Arms. So responsibility for what happened to me in that police custody cell rests at her doorstep. 48 hours after what happened in that custody cell, Arms steps down as head of operational support and is transferred to the College of Policing, where she's now an instructor in crowd control. So what happened? The police raided my house, and Freemasonry had a presence, and apparently I invited them in, like hell I did. I opened the door, and WPC, what's her name, Snow, Alana Snow, put her foot into the house and pushed in and arrested me inside the house. According to professional standards, I invited them all in. No, I didn't. Anyway, they came in. There's even an officer with a firearm. He was okay. He just sat down. He didn't get involved. But they were ferrets. They were all over the house. They're looking at the internet, seized my computer, seized my mobile phone, searching my Snow was searching my bookshelf, and she was made some comments about some books, and the books are very interesting. I will name some of them. One of them is called The Making of a Dangerous Individual, I Don't Want to Kill Your Children, by Staff Sergeant Steve Pratt, 22 SAS. So that's that got attention straight away because of the nature of the book. There was other books called Gangrene by Ali Renwick. Then there was some books by Captain Simon Haywood. That's a very controversial name. Some books on Ireland. But what the police didn't, if they would have asked me, I would have told them. They're all to do with PTSD and trauma. And then they found a load of books written by coppers. There was Steve Hayes, his books. There was Maggie Oliver's book, Clive Driscoll, who did the Stephen Lawrence case, and more importantly, was involved in the Shirley Oaks Children's Home case. There was Bright. There was Michael Haynes, the head of the Met Paedophile Unit, who I know. There was all these books on policemen who spent a lot of their career investigating child abuse. And it was interesting. One of the mental health nurses wrote on my medical records that I'm delusional about high-level paedophilia. So I'm pretty certain, because I never discussed it with her, it was what was when they were searching my home. Anyway, Andy, I get taken by car to Avon and Somerset, please, because I had this brain injury. Someone had to accompany me. It was tasked with my safeguarding. And we get to Avon and Somerset Bridgewater Police Custody Centre. And there was a Sergeant Moyse on duty there, custody sergeant. And I handed over my brain injury identity card. And I was then, and I asked for the headway solicitor, never got that. I was taken downstairs to a custody cell with the lady who's tasked with my safeguarding. We were placed in the custody cell. The door was left open but guarded by police. It's all got CCTV all over it and in the cells and microphones. Then we waited to see what happened, and I was taken to see the G4S nurse, a nurse Bell. I would not engage with them. There was 2 assistants, I believe, a paramedic there, the mental health, the nurse Bell from G4S, woman police constable Alana Snow, and the lady tasked to safeguard me. And I wouldn't engage. And it was interesting then, Alana Snow had in her presence a court of protection certificate, but the nurse decided I could be interviewed. I asked for a doctor. I was denied access to that doctor. I asked for a psychologist, didn't get that. Taken back to the cell. Then what happened? About 10 minutes later, Bill and Ben, was it Bruce Matthews and Benjamin McAvoy arrived, dressed as, they looked like ambulance paramedics. Then after a couple of minutes, something told me these are not paramedics, these are mental health nurses. And they were. And then they were shortly joined by a woman dressed all in black called Carly Reynolds. Again, another mental health, all employed by Somerset NHS Foundation Trust. Then for almost 2 hours, Avon and Somerset Police in the custody centre allowed me to be questioned whilst under police caution, whilst under arrest by these mental health nurses without a solicitor present. No solicitor. Now, if you read PACE, Police and Criminal Evidence Act, that cast out what was going on in that custody cell. What is also interesting, all the custody where these nurses were, all the CCTV footage was deleted within 4 weeks. So there'd be no evidence of what went on. Bridgewater. We have recovered one tape. We've got that. I think colleagues have got that, and that will go online. And after 2 hours, during part of this, my woman safeguarding me, appropriate adult, she was removed from me, leaving me on my own with these individuals. Anyway, after 2 hours, they left. But what I didn't know, Andy, they've got into my medical records. They accessed them. And they had a field day, making allegations, false allegations. And anyway, what was going on upstairs this time in the custody room, in the custody centre, I didn't know. I am now privileged to it. The officer who oversaw my arrest, bearing in mind these allegations had their origin with the worshipful brother, Simon Oliver, care of the Berkshire Masters Lodge in Reading and the Lodge of Instruction. The officer who oversaw my arrest and my time in that custody centre was a Freemason of a Masonic lodge where membership had been drawn from the police service, and he was the worshipful master. And the solicitor was chosen for me was not the duty solicitor, was not the headway brain injury solicitor. It was a provincial grand officer of Somerset Freemasonry. And someone sent me a photograph of these two individuals together, standing, one person between them, but all in regalia at a Masonic meeting. So it had a significant involvement, but the provincial grand officer took a couple of steps back and decided he wasn't going to get involved, but not before making some unhelpful comments that I would pursue him and I would harass him. Never had. Anyway, so we've obtained all of that. But then I got taken to the police custody centre, questioned under caution. The police knew that I hadn't been sending malicious communication to Judge Simon Oliver and his family, his daughter and his son. But what they did to me, Andy, they withheld the email addresses and the IP addresses. Avon and Somerset still haven't given me that evidence. Neither have Hampshire Police, where this came from. They won't give it to me. But we've now got the whole lot. You can read them. I'll get someone to send them to you. And the email addresses weren't my address. I never sent them. And I was described as being bullish in one of the comments. I wasn't bullish. I was traumatized. But I could have been bullish. But throughout what Avon and Somerset Police hadn't known at that time, I've been under 24 hours safeguarding. And those safeguarding me include people who had served in the police, in counter-terrorism, and in other units, and people who had been involved in the military in various roles. And because we knew the attack was gonna happen, we'd known about 9 months earlier. And what had happened, Andy? I've been sent an email by the Government Legal Services Treasury solicitors under Susan McGibbon, and that email had a tracking device in it to see who I was corresponding with. And when we realised what was going on, it was forwarded to the National Crime Agency. Then College came forward and we monitored it. And all this time I was being sent all these emails from people associated with Simon Oliver. So when the police grabbed my computer, they would find everything on there. But so they did. They walked right into it. But you can't blame the individual. All of these individuals. These instructions were coming from the top, and they were coming from Clare Arms and maybe above that. But they're being called. But these mental health nurses, they are, yes, she is, yes, Susan McGibbon. Yeah. Ultimately, Susan McGibbon is responsible for me ending up homeless on the streets with brain injury because the government legal department had not disclosed my quarter protection certificates. She may not like to know, well, she can know now, but the entire litigation files her department hold in the case of Oliver and Javed Sheikh, someone's recovered those files, be it a disgruntled civil servant. I don't have them here. They were sent on a CD to someone, and I've been told exactly where to look. And one of Oliver's relatives decided to go on Facebook and say that I'm his father's online stalker, and that I served in the Royal Navy, which I had. So yes, Andy, what started off as a very simple attack, it's all unfolding, and there's going to be many people like me where this has happened to. Anyway, let's carry on. These mental health nurses who attacked me wasn't just Matthews, Reynolds, and McAvoy. Over 120 people employed by Somerset NHS Foundation Trust entered my medical records, and they absolutely trashed me. One of the most unpleasant was done by a mental health nurse, and she'd written, no, anyone seeing me, they have to come in pairs because of assaults on my wife and children. When I found that, it was very unpleasant, and I asked Thames Valley Police, more recently the Chief Constable Jason Hogg, in a subject access request, could I have the files, because it will clear me of that specific allegation. And Jason Hogg, as a data controller, won't give me the evidence that will clear me. So as far as I asked Thames Valley Police, Jason Hogg, and Katie Barrow-Quinn, who was an assistant chief constable, give me a crime reference number that I've sorted my wife and children, and they won't give me one. So you got to ask, well, how's all these allegations unfolding? And fortunately, the Crown Prosecution Service London were absolutely brilliant. They dealt with it very quickly, the regional office and the Crown Prosecutor headquarters in London, and they wrote to me. I've got the letter, and it said, Mr. Lawrence, following extensive investigations and contacting regional officers, we found no evidence or any record whatsoever that you assaulted your wife and children. I mean, it's just so, how many people has this NHS trust done it to? The problem was not the psychiatrists. Dr. Upperday, who was being set up to section me, he wrote in the medical records, he wasn't buying in. Why, if Mr. Lawrence is so seriously ill, why hasn't he been seen by a psychiatrist? And the chief medical officer, Professor Miriam, he was absolutely brilliant. He was a consultant psychiatrist. He didn't buy into it, and he blocked access to all my medical records after 120 people had been in there, Andy. Now, how many times they've done that to other people? But the trust has made a disclosure to me, and I've been given the full names, the times and the dates that these 120 people entered my records and what they've put on there. One of the allegations, Andy, was so serious that to protect myself, I had to contact the security services, including MI5, because of the nature of this allegation. But wow. One of the people who had been involved in my safeguarding had served at a senior level in counter-terrorism, and in royalty protection. And he said, Len, if you're guilty, so am I, because I was involved in your safeguarding with others. But the security services, MI5, who I spoke with for more than an hour, they were absolutely brilliant. And so were the National Crime Agency. But we've caught them all, Andy, all of them. They accused me, we've had it earlier, another allegation was I falsified my brain injury card with the Headway logo. When I found out about that, I contacted the National Police Chief Council, told them of the allegation, sent a copy of my card, and the then head of the National Police Chief Council, Assistant Commissioner Martin Hewitt, he dealt with it and contacted Avon and Somerset Police. And more recently, Chief Constable Gavin Stevens, he, his staff officer, have dealt with it. They had a meeting with Headway. That was it. That was the card I have. And I'm accused of putting the National Police Chief moniker in the bottom right-hand corner onto my card. As you can see, it comes with that moniker on it. That card's been absolutely brilliant. The only place where I really needed it was in the Avon and Somerset Police custody cell, and it afforded me no protection whatsoever. Again, it was all about having me sectioned to silence me about what has occurred to me. A data access request with Avon and Somerset Police has proven to be quite interesting. The email addresses they had for this person who had been sending emails allegedly to Oliver's son and daughter and others, it weren't my email address, but the police had withheld that from me. And in 2013, Superintendent Pryor of the Bristol district had been held personally responsible for the recovery of my caller protection certificates in 2013 by Superintendent Paul Richards, who was a really good cop. And it names all the officers involved who refused to recover these caller protection certificates, which were being held by the law firm Simpson Miller in Bristol. And they had them, but here's the ironic thing. Yeah, that's it. That's what Matthews wrote. He adopted his F-Way badge. Absolute nonsense. I don't have that expertise. And the National Police Chief Council and Headway have dealt with this. But as a psychiatrist reading that is going to say, wow, this man, what has he been up to? Yeah, there we are. That's how they discredit you. There's going to be a lot of people, Andy, who are in prison or, importantly, are detained under the Mental Health Act, like our friend in Austria, Peter Horstra. And they're never going to get out. They're going to be held because of individuals like this.
Unfortunately, what makes me still confused, I can understand Simon Oliver's involvement and Claire Arms and a couple of others, but why did 120 odd NHS staff put their noses in for no reason, unless they're married to Freemasons?
Yeah, well, I've got everyone their names. I think we can set about now asking every one of them why they went in my medical records.
And they're not just at low level, are they? They're not just nurses, they're senior management, probably.
Everything. But I got the whole list. There was some good staff in there. Like I say, the chief medical officer, he was really good, Daniel Merriam. Professor, consultant psychiatrist, Dr. Upperday, who was consultant psychiatrist. Like I said, they didn't buy into what was going on. But as for the rest of them, they weren't pleasant at all. The data protection people were very good, very good. But the problem rests with the senior management. A man by the name of Phil Bryce, who was the corporate director, alleged that a lady called Chloe Stepney, a mental health nurse who's head of forensic mental health at Somerset NHS Foundation Trust, had conducted an investigation. When asked to provide that copy of that investigation, the trust could find no evidence of any investigation into these mental health nurses by Chloe Stepney. The word forensic mental health, forensic psychiatrist, forensic mental health nurse, it sounds really impressive. But all it is a mental health nurse who works in the criminal justice system. And from what I've seen with these people, there could be a lot of appeals pending if they've given evidence against people. Like I say, on one of the allegations, I threatened a High Court judge. I could have gone to prison for that. Because some mental health nurse lied or she didn't check her facts. But like I say, we've got all of them. Look at them. Every one of them's gone in my records.
I'm just reading some a year ago in 23 at Musgrove Park Hospital. A worker was inappropriately accessing records, and if we look, I don't need to read it all, but basically, it's common in that trust to do that. And guess what? The name you mentioned, Phil Bryce, Director of Corporate Services, basically said we apologise, unreservedly to every person whose hospital records been inappropriately accessed. It's common knowledge there.
Yeah, right. Okay, that's very helpful to me.
So common practice, even. I'll send you that link.
Thank you very much. That's very helpful. Mine event with them occurred in 22, March 30th of March, 2022. So that was a year earlier. But the question is, Andy, and I sent it to you earlier, what have they entered on these people's records? What have they entered on these people's records? They could have put anything down there. They could have put child abuser, delusional, extremely dangerous. The public won't know what's been put on their medical records by these nurses. But how I viewed this, and my belief is, Avon and Somerset Police, and possibly other forces, but definitely Avon and Somerset, they are using the mental health system. They weaponized it. So, for instance, if you got a female, I know of one who's identified that she's been raped and she's lost money, been defrauded. A number of them been defrauded. She said when she went to Avon and Somerset Police, they didn't take any action. Then she found herself under the attention of Somerset NHS mental health staff. So by referring victims of crime to mental health, it's a very effective way, Andy, of reducing the crime figures and offloading these people. And that's what's been done in my case. Like I say, they are vicious. I'm just finishing off some documents at the moment. It went to the Nursing Midwifery Council, and allegedly they've investigated. They've now admitted they hadn't investigated it. Got it in front. They can provide no evidence of an investigation. And neither had the trust. So it just shows all these complaints are being whitewashed. Phil Bryce has left the trust about a year ago. Good riddance to him. But there's a lot of history, what's been going on, and it will come out. There's a man, you may know him, a friend of mine called Trevor Neelan, and Trevor has been involved with these house repossessions where people are losing their homes through fake court orders, and notably Lloyd's Bank. And Avon and Somerset is very much featured in that. It's on Panorama next Monday night. And I attended one of these meetings, and it was a pattern of what's been going on. I'll say we've talked now for a good hour. If we call it a night come now, we're carrying on further. But people are so vulnerable to attack with mental health, and it is not regulated by their professional bodies. And the IOPC, a complete waste of time. Her Majesty Inspector of Constabularies, their latest publication about Avon and Somerset, they don't look after vulnerable people. But I mean, Arms, she should be sacked, but she's not. She's been moved to the College of Policing in a safe place. Anyway, back to you.
Yeah, I was just saying there's more trust inappropriately accessing records, and that can't be right when there's vulnerable people around.
No, it's I mean, I've got all the files here. One of the things it actually says, so I'm just looking at it now. Here we are, I've just got into it now, and it says, entered by the Safeguarding Services, Leonard Lawrence, alert type, vulnerable adult at risk, vulnerable adult at risk of exploitation. Oh, did they attack me? Here it is. This is done by one of the mental health nurses. Potential risks to worker due to previous assaults on family members, visits to be impaired, threats to a High Court judge, grandilised beliefs and a fixation on a court of protection matter, which is little understood. He won't engage. There's a farade about him, exposing him. Had several fake IDs when arrested. Has a GoFundMe page making a living out of this. Reports he was in the Navy, but would not tell us why. He'd signed the Official Secrets Act. He adopted his headway badge. But here's a very, very interesting one. When alone in the evenings, left to send offensive emails specifically to Judge Oliver and his family. And it goes, Oliver appears to be the judge who awarded the Court of Protection that Len is adamant is to keep him trapped. Now, I'm going to repeat that. Oliver appears to be the judge who awarded the Court of Protection that Oliver is adamant is to keep him, Len Lawrence, that is myself, trapped. Well, since 2012, Berkshire Freemason, the worshipful brother Simon Oliver, care of the Berkshires Masters Lodge in Reading, has held me under Part 7 of the Mental Health Act, 1983, I think it is. So he's held me for 13 years, that individual's held me. Now, that's a matter that needs to go to the United Nations. In fact, they have been in contact with me regarding human rights. So yes, Oliver's held me for 13. That was the problem when the Avon and Somerset wanted to section me. It would all come out, and the psychiatrists would not know what to do then. But if it had gone to the police and they had tried to falsely prosecute me, Andy, then the first question which would have come out in court was, hang on, this man's been held for 13 years under the Mental Health Act by Berkshire Freemasons Simon Oliver. And We never recovered his court of protection certificates into Avon and Somerset Police in 2013. So they got themselves into a right little pickle.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was trying to find a photo of him as a Freemason, but
I've
you
got
know,
that. I'll send it to you on the court order. But like I say, for reasons I'm not
we've
quite
had
sure, a lot of people, could it be disgruntled civil servants, disgruntled police officers? Who knows? But they've certainly let me have all the documents I've never been allowed to see. But it was that detective superintendent, detective inspector, they'd nailed Oliver. They knew what they were looking for, and they'd nailed Claire Arms, and they get removed from the case. And that will only be the deputy chief constable or chief constable, one of those two.
if anybody wants to show, sorry, fintalkradio201 at gmail.com, and Andy, this was Lawrence. Please share this far and wide.